Okay, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is another very exciting edition of the neweveningisle.com conversation series. And today I have a very, very special, very wonderful guest uh, tuning in all the way from Paris, France. We have what I think is the 21st century's poetry edition of Leonardo da Vinci, Leonardo Marcos, who um, who um, my main motivation for bringing him here was with the rise of artificial intelligence and other threats to poetry, especially in the West. I have been kind of hungry in search for solutions in mind. And upon reading your biography and your body of work, you do seem to have the best solution, which, from my research, you coined it the new poetry, which is when
Yeah,
you make poetry, traditional poetry, instead of maintaining, you know, traditional poetry, you make poetry the theme of much more advanced, much more elaborate mediums like theater and ballet and film projections and even event projections. To a wider Western audience, Leonardo, how would you describe yourself and what you do?
oh, it's not easy to describe myself, and my work because, well, I always grew up with poetry. My mother was reading to me all the time poetry when I was a child, and I grew up with this, this family. What poetry was very important, and certainly it's something what has been for me. Something what already inspired me very very soon when I was a child, but also poetry is for me not only it's not the only thing, because I'm also a photographer, I'm a filmmaker, and also I'm doing some performances in lives on with dance, ballet, So I try to mix all these things, all these disciplines, but in a way, very lot of people say to me always. You're the future for the poetry. You know what you do. It's very modern. It's very new. But in fact, if you, Jan, if you see um, in the history of art, what I study, is something that was already existing for many centuries. I mean, we didn't have to work to wait that Gutenberg, who created the first impression to make books, that the poetry exists. So the poetry was already existing, and certainly in a very powerful way by the antiquity and the Greek poets, and they did it with music, they did it with ballet, they did it with theater, so it's not something really new, in fact, it's something from the past that I try in my way to bring it again, because I think it's very important for me in art to um, to search always what can be new, but also what can be new is something coming also from the past. I always say that we can't create without memory. We need memory. And I think the memory is what brings new things. And this is what I call the new poetry. In fact, it's a new poetry, but from the Renaissance. You was talking about Leonardo da Vinci, and it's exactly what the people did it in the Renaissance, in the time of the Renaissance, and they try to come back in the past, with the antiquity, and to bring something new with that. This is what I find interesting: is always to bring something from the past, but done in a very new way.
It's amazing. So in your mind, this has always been going on, trying to further the tradition and the memory of the past into futuristic.
Always. For
Always.
me, it's very important. I always say that for me, I am poetry comes from came from the antiquity. It was Sappho. It was also the gods like Dionysos. They bring also the poetry in the theater, mixing that with ballet, and this is what I love. And I think that today it's the right time. the right time to bring that again. And of course, I'm doing that with new technologies. Not I'm using a lot of new technologies to bring that poetry. And also, what is important, is that poetry. It's very difficult to bring that to the people, because it's not it's very strange poetry, because when you're a child you always learn a poetry in school, and everybody remember a few verses or at least one poem, what they can keep in his memory for forever. And then in the same time nobody really read poetry. It's quite difficult, huh? You know that. And I try that poetry can be the most popular possible, and it's true that to do that in the way of they did it in the past, what was very successful, because in the time of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Egyptians, it was very powerful, the poetry. And today is again difficult, but I think that with the new technologies, you can bring something completely new and a new poetry, And of course, you can't, you have some difficulties, because with the technology, you cannot do what you want exactly, but at least you can do things incredible. I mean, for example, I received a command from a bank, a very famous bank in France, to bring a poetry, what I wrote, and to project that, in several languages. So in a bank, imagine, that means that the bankers who were working there every day, and there is, I think, 9,000 bankers there. So it's a very important bank in France, in Paris. And every day, all these bankers, all these traders, they come in and they have these words, my poetry, with projection, sounds, and they cross a corridor like that, and then after that they go to work. And I think it's amazing for me to do that, because I'm so happy that at least these few verses that I wrote, that there are many languages, that at least they can bring something, even to people that they are usually working with numbers and not with letters, because they're bankers.
Yeah, and yeah,
It's an
that's pretty
example. It's one example.
that's pretty funny. I That just reminds me of a TED talk I was watching, and it's funny that you use that kind of juxtaposition of like bankers wanting someone's poetry on
Yeah.
their structure of their building. I remember somebody saying that the problem with philosophy today is that philosophy books are written by consultants and not philosophers. So, that's, so so who got you started as an artist in your early years?
I started, in fact, strange enough, I started with the music. I was very, it was very important for me to create a band and to sing and to write poetries, and to make a rock and roll band. What was very creative, and it was for me very important to start with the music.
Mhm.
And then slowly what happens is that when I was on stage, I start to put my words in televisions and to project the poems, etc. So, and there was also ballet and many things. So it started like that, and I was quite young. And one of the first person, but I don't know if you know him in America, was Serge Gainsbourg, who was the first person what I met, and that start to help me to go home.
Yeah.
But I
So
started with the music, like you, no? You're a musician too, isn't
yeah,
it?
and so it was the concerts that got you hooked on lights and projections and stuff. It was from your time
Yeah,
performing at concerts. Okay.
yeah. I
So
started with that. Yeah.
yeah. So I was not familiar with the poet that you said, but there is one other French poet that I do know. And I actually, you almost immediately came to mind. I see you as like a 21st century of a man called Jean Cocteau. Um,
Ah, of course.
Pretty,
Oh,
yeah, because because I saw a lot of comparison. You talk about your concepts like electronic poetry, digital poetry, and if you read upon Jean Cocteau, he didn't even describe himself as a cinematographer or a set designer. Like I wrote down some examples. Like he referred to himself as a poeste Roman, poeste theater, poeste cinematographique. So did that play any influence on you, Cocteau?
Yes, very much, because yes, of course, Cocteau was really the person who, exactly how you describe it, who did so many things with the poetry. And he has a sentence, what I love always to repeat, but I'm sorry, I'm going to try to do it in English, to translate in English, not easy for me. But he said, a poet uh, who doesn't stay only writing books and doesn't try other things. It's a poet who is going to drown in this own anchor, the anchor where you write. You know what I mean? That's mean that it's a very beautiful metaphor. That's mean that the anchor is to write. Of course, in that time it was the anchor you write with on the paper. With a pencil, and you need the anchor. But he said, if a poet is only limited to write like this, in that case, he's going to draw like in the water. He's
That
going
that
to draw
that was a
in
big
his
yeah.
anchor.
What you just said, that's a big puzzle piece. What you just said, that just like connected so many puzzles.
And there
Um,
is another one from Cocteau, what I love very much is that they accuse him a little bit, they criticize him, they say, you do so many things, not only poetry, why you do so many things. And he said, no, I like to jump from one, how you say, branche, from one tree to another one, but at the end it's the same tree.
yeah. So it's like a circle where it's it's where its edge is nowhere, but the inside of it is everywhere, almost like that.
Exactly,
Great,
absolutely.
great. So and even now, I imagine not many people here in the States would understand these concepts that you've pioneered, and even I actually had a hard time understanding it very clearly. So let's start off with your work, which I believe was the first. Um, it was either the first multimedia project or the first multimedia project that you made into poetry, which you did something called the Mona Lisa initiatory route at the Louvre in Paris.
Sorry, I didn't hear it. The what? Sorry.
Um, the Mona Lisa initiatory route. That's what I.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That was yes, that was a long time ago. Yes, I started. It was a command, in fact, from a company, a Korean company. The name is Samsung. Who wanted to make an event where they can show the new technologies what they have with the television screen. They're really perfect. And they wanted an artist to work on that in the Louvre to bring that. So because it was the Louvre, of course, the painting, the most famous in the Louvre, what everybody come for, of course,
Famous
is
in the
the
world. Yeah.
in the world. So I thought, yes, there is one thing what I wanted to do. If really those screens are very perfect, is um, is to because Da Vinci was working with many details, and there was very many things what were hidden in the painting. He loved to do that. Da Vinci was a very strange man. He was doing paintings, but in these paintings was many stories, things
Hidden
very,
details.
very strict.
Yeah.
And because of that, I wanted uh, to bring fragments only of the Mona Lisa, several parts only, in pieces. And because it was very good screens, you could see really exactly after I shoot the I did the shooting of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. And then you was discovering progressively, the Mona Lisa, still the end. But before to discover it, I I was I put my verse slowly like that coming from one TV to another one with every piece, and at the end you discover the whole completely poem what I wrote with the portrait of Mona Lisa. It was a discovering, and you discover very strange things, inside this painting. And I wrote a poetry what have to do with this mystery also. And this is what was one of my first experience.
Yeah, Leonardo was a strange man. I studied him for a long time, and I find him very inspiring too, because a new way that I've looked at him that somebody told me was if you think about it, he really on paper he had no reason to succeed. I mean, he was born out of wedlock, uh, received no formal education. He was openly gay. He was left-handed. He was a
Yeah,
vegetarian. But so it's very I'm very inspired by him for that reason. Was he really on based on statistics, he shouldn't have been successful at that time, but now he's one of the only few people that we even know about from that era 500 years ago. So
yeah.
yeah. So what is your definition to us as of digital poetry? What is digital poetry?
Digital poetry. It's really there is many ways. First it can be projections. That my poetry can be project. And you can read the poetry when it is project in the wall, in screens. It's a movement of the words. You can read it with the movements of the world. This is the first thing. The second thing is, of course, also with the music, because I like to work with computers, and with musicians, and then the poetry come with these digital effects. And third, the digital poetry is also for me, it's a bit different, but it's also important for me. For example, when it was the COVID, I create all completely website. What I make when we were all closed in our house, we could not move, and I create something virtual. And inside this virtual was a dancer and movies and things what I could take from my memories, and I mix all that and I create poetry with that. What was very new because I think there doesn't exist before that you can go, to search yourself in a place, to go to another one and to another one, and then you discover a movie, then you discover a ballet, then you discover a poetry. And this was very much inspired from Cocteau, because Cocteau has always this movement, always in his movies, that you go from one room to another one, then to another one. The difference was that you make it like you can do it in a video game, and but that's why it was something very different.
Yeah, thank you. What is now what is electro poetry?
Actual poetry it's live, it's something what you can do on stage with electro. For example, I did that many times, and few years ago I had a place in Paris what I love very much called the Tiger, le Tigre in French, what was in a very beautiful area in Paris, where was living Cocteau, very close by. He was living there, and Palais Royal, and it was a very small club, and like a little cabaret, and there the people coming there was usually people work in fashion, in fashion in Paris, was coming there Kate Moss, and musicians too, like Pete Doherty, And I tried to put inside, it was called by Leonardo, the evenings, and I put always poetry inside, and it was done with techno, with electro, with techno, and was some muse girls were reading my poetry, but with techno. So people were dancing, like in a dancing party, like in a club, with poetry, my
Awesome.
poetry.
And then the last of your three branches of future poetry is interactive poetry.
Sorry, I didn't have what?
The last of your three branches I call is interactive poetry.
Ah, yes, absolutely. Yes, 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 of course. Yes, it's something that I love very much to create. That was very, very, very special. I did it in a gallery, what is very close from where I was living, Cocteau, in the Palais Royal always, is one of my galleries, so it's quite famous in France, called Pierre Passebon, what did exhibitions with David Lynch, who was American. And
David Lynch.
yes, yes,
Yeah, he passed away
it
this
was
year.
in his gallery.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
passed away. Yeah, I was very sad about his passing in
yeah,
January.
absolutely, absolutely. It's really very sad because he was very talentful, and I met him in this gallery with my gallerist, and um,
What
and
did you guys
there,
talk about?
sorry,
What did you and David Lynch talk about?
we talk about it. It was very funny because he did an exhibition called Fetish. What was about fetishism of the legs, and he did it with a French. I don't know if you know him, a French fashion designer from shoes called Christian Louboutin. He's very famous in
I think,
France.
yeah, I think I know who that is.
Yeah, it's very beautiful and very feminine. And he worked with dancers to create some photographies about legs, but in a very strange way,
Surreal, because that's David Lynch.
like David Lynch can make it. And I asked him, and we discussed about that, the fact that I thought that for me, his work have to do with childhood, because fetishism is for me when you see the legs is they have to do maybe when you're a little child and you see the legs of your mother, of your the woman in the
Your
street.
classmates, yeah.
Yeah, and he said to me absolutely. And then we start to talk about that, and the fact that the childhood is something a little bit difficult always, it's creates something a little bit strange. And what I did is that to talk about the interactive digital poetry is that I put some three of my actresses, muse, who were in the room of the gallery. There were three TVs with the three girls in a movie, what I did with poetry. But they could also go with a computer because they were on a big screen, the three girls, and you could talk with her. And it was a little bit the beginning, of the, how you call that, the cam girls, I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
you know what
Cam
I
girls,
mean?
yeah.
Things a little bit erotic, and I found that very original to do that, but with poetry,
Yeah.
and not and to change that, like I did with the video games. I move it on something different, and I
Mhm.
did the same there. So the people came, and they first, of course, they were very pretty, So what's your name? Blah blah blah. What is? How old are you? Where are you living? Etc. Etc. But at the end, what was incredible is because I gave it to them, to the three
The models.
actresses. I gave them my poetry. They could answer with poetry. There are all the possibilities to answer with a poetry, and this is what they did. But what happens is that because they answered back to the people who were with the computers with poetry, they ask, who are you? And they answer with a verse. Then they start themselves to do the same. So at the end, it was completely surrealistic because the people, they all was rating poetry to be that the girl can send also the answer with poetry and etc. and etc. And it was very amazing to do that.
That
It was
sounds
incredible.
that sounds incredible. So this project you did with Lynch called Fetish. So that was the
No,
is
no,
there
I didn't. No, no, I didn't do with Lynch. It was in the same gallery, but
okay.
Lynch did an exhibition, what was very beautiful, called Fetish, and me, I did that really later because
Yeah.
I worked with this gallery many times, and I've been exposed there. But it was another time. It was not with Lynch, of course.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. I was so devastated when he passed this year in
Yeah,
January.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
really sad because he had so much talentful, and he was really incredible. He was doing music too,
yeah, he
and
was just like you. He was multidisciplinary. So
absolutely, completely more than me because he was a painter. He could do drawings. He could do statues. It was really complete
yeah.
art.
Yeah, the modern Renaissance man as they call it. So
Exactly,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what should assuming that, we could inspire poets in more countries, like here, like Australia, like UK, who would emulate these techniques, how would you want them to emulate, digital and interactive poetry?
Sorry, the what? So
So how would you so if we could inspire poets from more countries like America, Australia,
yeah, yeah.
and they would want to incorporate your techniques like digital and interactive poetry, what do you think they should do?
I think they have to feel very free, because poetry can be anywhere, anywhere, and if you think like that, only if you wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night or whatever, and you think that poetry can be everywhere and it's possible, and you know that it's possible, that you can make anything with poetry, anything. This is, you have to feel that, to feel to be free to do that, because otherwise the imagination, the creation doesn't come. You really have to think like that. It's a matter to to be yourself in this mood. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I think. When I was in the time of the I was in the time of the COVID. I didn't know how to do, what to do, like anybody, but I start to imagine things, I can put poetry. Also, another thing, I have a very good correspondence with a person of poetry for many years. We only write to each other with poetry, with this telephone. I send poems, and the person send me back poems, and I send back, and etc. And we have 100, 200 poems like that, written short, but it can be anywhere. So it's the most important thing is to feel free to make it and to think that poetry is not only in books. It can be anywhere. It's very good that there are books. You see, I have many books. I love
Yeah,
books too.
it's all about. So I think part of the problem is like the reason like there's not more people doing what you do is maybe there's too narrow of a there's too narrow of a mindset that people have towards poetry that it can only be on paper. It can only
Yeah.
be it can only be narrated in a video or something, and where you have a much more wide view of it, where it can be used in much more approaches.
Yes, anywhere. You can wear it in a t-shirt, you can wear it on clothes, you can anything. You can, as I said, you can discuss in poetry with the telephone, with all the new technologies, and the new way of things that you can make. If you desire to write on poetry, you can do it anywhere. There is no limit.
That's
And that's
right.
the good thing. And especially with the new technologies, it helps a lot too, because in the past it's a little bit more complicated. What I explained to you about the bank, when I started, with this kind of projections, the technology was made only for one evening, for one event, but you couldn't have all the time, every day the movement of the projections, But when we saw that it was possible with the new technologies to make that all the time, to bring that as any artwork, what can stay, and it's not only one evening, you know, then it start to be better. And new technologies helps a lot. This is why, you know, I try to bring many things from the past because I love the history, I love Renaissance, I love antiquity, but I love also new technologies because, and I love the present and the future, what can bring to possibilities and opportunities for the poetry to exist, to live, and this is the main thing. Is the really, there is always poetry has been always very in the shadow, and always very hidden, because it's difficult to read poetry. We have to admit it's not so easy. But, you know, for example, when it was the Second World War, in France, the partisans, the resistance, the main thing of the resistance was a poetry from Paul Éluard.
Yeah,
Liberté,
Paul, you are.
Huh? Liberty, I write your name. In fact, it was for his wife that he wrote that. But everybody thought that it was, and he had to do with the fight against the Nazis, And you know what they did? When the planes they came from England, to on France, who was occupied by the Hitler and the Germans, they sent the poetry, just this poetry. They sent it with thousands of papers to the people just to give them hope. So imagine a poetry sometimes can be the most powerful thing, Et Liberté, j'écris ton nom, is so powerful that it has been the bandier of the freedom for the resistance.
Yeah, I wish I would have been taught that. And it doesn't seem to be, in my, in my case in the United States, I don't really even blame my youth. I don't blame the general public here for not liking poetry because even among institutions like school, like church, it's not particularly a valued medium, especially in modern times. It's seen as, unfortunately, a lot of people view it as very effeminate when obviously history does not show that. Many of the most the most gallant soldiers that ever lived loved poetry. Like a few I can think of is Bruce Lee loved poetry, Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
um, Alexander Karelin, who was the most feared competitive wrestler in the entire Soviet Union, and now he teaches poetry full time. Yeah, it's unfortunate that even that's even taught to us here. That it's such a narrow viewpoint of what poetry is. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then I read somewhere that you describe your view of art as school of thought as sensualism.
Yeah.
So sensualism, like being largely a philosophy thing. What does sensualism mean in as an artist?
Ah, that's a very interesting question. Centralism, in fact, I use it in a very philosophical way because centralism was in the it was an idea, a concept from philosophers in the 18th century, 17th and 18th century, and it has to do with the experience. Socialism is you live with something, you are connected with the a kind of reality. You are connected with your sense, with what you see, with what you feel. This is have to do with centralism originally, and this is how philosophers they use it. I mean, it started to be used on that way. But of course, I like also the idea that is experimental things, what is sensualism, because it's connected with experience, that is also connected with the idea of sensuality, what is different than sensualism, but it's the same word almost. So, and I love sensuality because I think that sensuality is the best way for poetry to create emotion and to create more freedom. I think it's something necessary in the poetry. And if you come back in the past, you can see that it was like that. If you take, for example, I was talking about the Greek. If you see all what the lyric poetry has been from Sappho, it was a poetry extremely elegant, very beautiful, only feminine, but with a lot of sensuality, but really with something really sophisticated and very special. And in the same time, if you see the tragedy of what Nietzsche talked very much about in the Greek theater, you know, especially connected with the god Dionysus, uh, it was also kind of sensuality, not only sensualism, but sensuality. And it was connected with the dance, so with the body, with the movement. And this creates emotion. And for example, I think this have to do with the same as with the poetry. You can find that anywhere. For example, I was very happy that it happens many times to me, strangely enough, because I'm not specially, I'm not, you know, I have no religion. I'm very out of that, you know. I grew up like that, but that the church, Catholic Church, opened its doors to me as an artist, and they said, okay, what you want that I do, and they say to me, oh, but what you do is beautiful. Please do that in that place in the church. I say, okay, and I start to imagine that I could work on the poetries from Saint Jean de la Croix. Saint Jean de la Croix is very beautiful poetry. He was a mystic from Spain, and it's so beautiful poetry, incredible. And this is with a lot of sensuality and sensualism. So I talk with them, the church, and I said, look, at Saint Jean de la Croix, can I do something a little bit with that? And say, of course, we love Saint Jean de la Croix. It's a very, very important mystic, and he's a very famous poet also because he wrote poetry. And they say, yeah, but there is sensualism inside this poetry because it's a poetry very sensualistic, you know, and in the words, in the metaphor, it's very special, you know, and they say to me, no, you can, of course, you can do that, and so I bring that in the church, and I was so happy that there was my favorite dancer, you know, Mathilde, and she was dancing, and was Jess Coleman on the piano, you know, it's the leader of the band Killing Joke, and he's also a classical musician. I work a lot with him. And he was playing the piano, and she was dancing, and was the projections on the altar of the church, and there were people crying, you know. So because of the beauty of this sensuality of this dancer, it was incredible, you know, and this was for me a very important moment. Yeah.
So what was the poet's name? Sir Jean de Croix?
It's called in French we say la nuit obscure, and in English we could say the darkest night.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
you will love it. It's
Darkest Night.
incredible. It's incredible because imagine that it's an experience. This is also what I have to do with sensualism. Is that mysticism have to do mysticism have to do with the experience, of course. Huh? So he wrote that in the 18th century, 17, 19, I don't remember exactly, but he was in the in his brain. He was so much involved into God, you know, as a mystic, of course. But what he wrote is that he started to be like a woman. and he was a man, but he started to write like he was a woman in love, and a woman in love with his lover, and of course his lover is God, but you don't know that in the poetry. And the way we describe all these moments of feelings that he's going to have disappointment with God, this experience is such beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's incredible how we describe the emotion of love and also the emotion what have to do with sensuality, not only with his body but with his brain. And I found that incredible. And this have to do with the experience. This have to do with the beauty. This have to do with sensuality. And this is what I call sensualism too.
Great. So yeah, so when you talk about, feeling and connecting, the number one thing that comes to mind in my shoes is E. E. Cummings. Um, do you know E. E. Cummings?
No.
Okay, so he was 20th century. He did the very famous American poem called "I Carry Your Heart." It's been featured in a lot of movies and stuff, and I wonder if you connect with this. So he did a poem called "A Poet's Advice to Students," and he says that a poet is someone who feels, but never write about what you think you're feeling or what you think feeling would feel like, because that's thinking about feeling and not feeling. So
Exactly. That's
correct.
exactly that. You say exactly what I try to explain with my bad English, but it's exactly that.
Yeah.
It's not only to think about about the same as what Cocteau said. It's not only to write. It's more than to write, because if it's not only or what I was telling to you before, it's not if poetry is not only to write. It's something what you feel, and because of you feel that, then you start or to write or to make ballet or to do, this is how it starts. It starts not only with the thinking, it starts with the what you feel. And this is what I call an experience. For me, it's very important. The same as I remember once was a journalist who say that my work was the experience of the experience of poetry in beauty. And this is true because for me it's very important. The beauty is an experience. It's not only you have that in front of you, you see a beautiful statue. Of course, there is beautiful statue, but it's more the connection what you have with the statue or what you have with the book that you're reading or with the ballet dancer, to feel that there is something very, really very important, and that's your life. And, you know, Baudelaire say you don't choose to be poet. It's almost a failure in the life because a poet is not something. It's not somebody, sorry, who is working normal. It's a little bit, it's something what fall down to you, and it's a failure in a way. But it's a failure that you can make something very special and very beautiful, and you can have a good life also, of course, with that.
Yeah, beautiful. So with so many of your projects being, pretty high production, like massive light projections and you having to hire various models and actresses and stuff, how do you plan these big projects in advance? Do you see them in your head and write them down, or do you discuss it with other people? What is your process usually of planning out these large installations?
Or I'm very uh, I'm very aware of the conditions from we have to create. I mean, I don't like, for example, I have some friends who are artists who are always against everything. They want to be that everything is perfect. They want that they want that this to be like this, like that, and it's not possible, but doesn't matter. They want it like that, and I don't like that because we need humility because you know, these people, we are not talking about Leonardo da Vinci. You know what happens to Leonardo da Vinci when he came to France? It was the king, Francois Ier, who bring him to his place where he was living, and he had to organize parties. Imagine, Leonardo da Vinci, the one of the most genius artists and also scientists that we ever had in the whole history of humanity. He has to make parties, and he accepted. And when they say to him, you have in this garden, you have to do in the night like this, like that, this is how the conditions, he accepted. But the same, not on him, but the same of all these big painters. What do you think that Michelangelo, when he was in the Chapelle 16, he started to say, "Ah no, this part I don't like it. I'm going to make it here, and no, this not too. I'm going to make it this." And this is what I don't like today with some artists. I don't say that they're all like that, but pity enough, there is too many artists like that, that they're very capricious. You know, they are very like children, you know, they want this, they want that. Me, I work completely different. You know, if I'm in a place and they say to me, this is the place, it's very tiny little place, very small, it's like a little box. What can you do there? And then I start to think there is always possibilities to make something, you know. Of course, it can be more difficult and more easier in certain in circumstances where they are more or more easy or more difficult, but it's up to an artist to accept that, you know. We are like working people as anybody, you know, and it's already a chance, and that we can make something, you know. So I try always to see what are the conditions, and when the conditions are in front of me, the COVID was also impossibility for me to do something. What can I do? If wait a moment, please, I have to open the door. Is it possible?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
No problem.
Listen,
No, not an
really,
issue. Okay, so we
no,
were talking.
I was telling that yes, the main thing is to try always to accept the conditions, even if they are difficult. It's always also an opportunity because you know, the time of the COVID, it was not easy to make something or to create something. That was the worst what can happen. So I could say, I'm going to write, and that's so. No, I think, what can I do? So I'm going to bring something virtual. And every time, this is how the projects started with me, is that I start always to see what are the conditions, what is this, what is that, and then I started to create.
Beautiful. So, so you don't like how everyone, a lot of artists these days, they kind of how picky they are, and they kind of want these conditions, and if they're not, and the non-compromise of it is if they're not going to have these perfect conditions, then they're not going to even participate as an artist. And you think the world needs less of that, basically.
Uh, yes, in a way, I think that's, as I said, I think we have to accept any conditions, you know. I mean, of course, if they say to you this, you have to go to make something that is really impossible because you don't do it, you explain it. But there is always possibilities. There is always possibilities to make something. And I find a little bit sad that artists today, I mean, I don't know in America, of course. I'm telling in Paris, I think it's a little bit sad that they are very capricious, you know, and they want everything, and like babies, you know, and this is not well. And you know, I tell you, when I was talking about you about Renaissance and all this, it has to do with that, because if you learn the history of art, if you learn how they work, the difficulties, what they have, you know, you have to paint a virgin, it has to be with a rock like that, and then you have to put there a preacher man in there. You, even if you don't want that he's there, but you have to put it there, and it's very difficult, the same as for Goya. It was very difficult to paint, or for Velasquez. Watch Velasquez.
Velasquez.
He did the most beautiful painting when he did the painting from the court. And it was a real command, and it was very difficult.
Hmm. Yeah. So how it is kind of here is sort of like a lot of artists, because art is so undervalued in this day and age in the West that we kind of have no other choice but to accept it. A lot of artists these days, at least in my environment, a lot of my friends that are artists, we still have to work day jobs and do art at night. The whole starving artist thing, the whole starving artist stereotype is very true, which I assume that's nothing new, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So um let me see. So and I read somewhere that you dedicated a film and photography project featuring French models, and you dedicated it to, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Alain Robe Grillet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You
So who
very
is
good.
he and why? So who was he and why is he important to you?
Yeah, he's still very important for me because he was the Pope of a new movement in literature called the New Roman.
New Roman.
The New Roman. In French, we say Nouveau Roman.
Okay.
And it was a big revolution. It was a big revolution in the literature. I mean, in France, and he bring that also in other countries. And he was quite famous also in America because he did many conferences, and he talked very much also with students in the universities. But Robbe-Grillet was really the Pope of the New Roman, So he created not only him, but also with Marguerite Duras, Michel Butor, Beckett. They were really a movement who wanted to change something in the literature. And they were very much influenced already with the surrealists. They started with, I think, with the idea to go on with the surrealism in a different way. And they bring something in the literature who was really absolutely new in the way to describe the fact, for example, that some of the romans of the books from Robbe-Grillet were really, describing things of details. You didn't have a story. You have describing things, and it was really very, very strange. And also, he did some movies who were very amusing, very special, very beautiful, in the very, very close from La Nouvelle Vague, the new wave from Godard, Truffaut, Romer. And it was a new language of poetry. And this brings a lot of poetry, in fact, because the way to write like that was very, very, very special. And when I was an adolescent when I discovered Robbe-Grillet. I was in the school. I was, I think, 14 years old. And I remember that was on the book, school book, was one page of a roman from Gustave Flaubert and one page from Alain Robbe-Grillet. And they show how it was connected, how it was, in fact, even if Flaubert was from the 19th century, Robbe-Grillet was from the 20th century, and it was really the connection of these two writers because they were writing in a very different way with more details. It was incredible that you can bring poetry only with describing things, describing objects, describing things you create emotion to. And I find that very, very, very original. And this is why already when I was 14 years old, I found that very original. Then I started to discover, of course, Marguerite Duras, Nathalie Sarraute, Beckett, sorry, Michel Butor was a very, very good poet. And also the aestheticism of Robbe-Grillet is very interesting, especially in the movies, because he had a way to film what was very, very special, Mainly the first movie called L'année dernière à Marienbad, it's called in English The Last Year of Marienbad, what is a place in a castle. And he did it with a guy from the new wave called Alain René, and together they did a movie. And this movie is so beautiful. And 2 years ago, the Chanel, the fashion show in Chanel was projecting in very big screens, the movie because Karl Lagerfeld was really mad also about this form of aestheticism. This it's very, very special.
All right, before we move on, is there too much noise going on? Because I hear a lot of bugs noising in my backyard and stuff. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, no, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay,
For the
great.
moment, I can
Wonderful.
hear you.
Great. Yeah, so it's funny you say how one of the most original uses of poetry came from using poetry to describe objects. Um,
Yeah.
I would recommend to you this book by Pablo Neruda from Spain. Yeah, I think he wrote
It's
yeah,
chill.
yeah. So he wrote this one book called I think it's like 14 minimal poems or uh 14 simple poems where he takes everyday objects like he takes forks, salt shakers, and bikes, and then he
Yeah.
writes a description out of them. So,
Yeah. I heard about that. Yes, very interesting. Yeah, I love Neruda. Neruda was Chilean, but he spent a
oh,
lot of time.
Chilean. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
He was
Chilean.
Chilean, but he wrote in Spanish, of course, and he has been a long time in Spain. He has been in the Civil War, I think, in Spain. And I love very much the poetry from him that I love very much is the elegies. I don't know how you say it in English. Elegias? You say that? Elegy? Yes, you say elegy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very, this is one of this part of his poetry is what I like the most.
Yeah, I he was one of my first introductions as a poet, and I still think he's amazing. So,
You can read in Spanish?
not in Spanish. I mean, some of it I can.
Yeah.
So it's mostly still translations, but I still perfectly understand what he's getting at here. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's still amazing. It doesn't diminish his beauty in any way. Um, so so what would be your recommendations as to as to let's see how do I articulate this to have more countries in the West, particularly that I think need this help, like the U.S., Australia. Is there any tips you would give on how we can sustain the value of poetry, how we can lift poetry up as a medium and not have it be this sort of underground art?
Oh, this I don't know. I think, as I said to you before, I think it's something else. It's a state of mind already. What you can have, you need to have. It's a state of mind. If you love poetry, poetry is something what you're living with. It's what you said just before about this American poet. And it's also what Cocteau say. It's also what a mystic like Saint Jean de la Croix say too. So I think it have to do with to live with that. Already you have to live with that. To live with that, that means that you're open to receive other things that are more subjective, that are more sensitive, and with that you can have more possibilities and opportunities, of course, to read poetry, and if you like that, if you like to be involved in that as an artist or as a simple as a poet, then you can start to think in a different way. You know, a poet, as Baudelaire say, is a person when he was born, he do the things differently. So because poetry is you when you write poetry, you don't speak like we are speaking now. We are using language, spatial language. So start with that. So you have to think like that. It's mean that you're different and that this difference have to be bring and to try to communicate with this difference. I think this is the main thing. But to start to communicate with this difference, then you have to already yourself be ready for that because otherwise you stay in your room and you don't want to get out and you write and nobody can know what you do and it's a little bit a shame because poetry need to be more open. Of course, what I said looks easy, but it's not so easy. But you can always try it. It's a matter to try, and if you have this state of mind, then you can go on. and especially if you use the new technologies, if you use internet, if you use whatever, you know, it's really very important to go and to try and to make things. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can make mistakes, it doesn't matter, but you can try. At least you can try, and you never know what can happen. So I never expected that something is going to tell me in the Louvre to make something, you know, to make creations. I never expect that, and the bank, even I never expect that too, you know. But it happens. And when I was doing that, the projections in the past, you know, before the bank, I was doing that mainly with the music, with you know, it was not so many people watching that, but it exists, and because it exists, after that, the bank said to me, "Oh, it's quite interesting. Why we don't try to make something new with that?" And it will be great. Now I'm working with it's already 2 3 years. I'm working with that with design, you know, objects, design what the project poetry, you know, with some screens, you know. I am busy with that at the moment too.
Mhm. What is your favorite? What is your favorite medium? If you had to do only one for the rest of your life, what would it be? Would it be?
So
Would you continue with the installations? Continue making music, films? If you had to pick one.
it's difficult for me to tell you that. I think,
Yeah, that's why we do multidisciplinary because we can't do just one.
yeah, it's very difficult for me to choose. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure
because I
David.
love words. I love the words. I love music, and I love pictures, movies. So,
I'm sure David Lynch would say the same thing. I'm sure he wouldn't. He would say just stick to music or just stick to painting or something.
yeah,
So from everything, I could be wrong, but it sounds like from everything I'm saying, so we kind of have we see what some people see as this threat to poetry, which is artificial intelligence,
yeah.
with AI chats and stuff like that. But I could be wrong on this, but from what you've told me, you seem like to be pretty optimistic about it that this will actually open more doors for poetry than close it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's very interesting to work on that. I didn't start already with that, but I think it can be very interesting as anything, any medium. You know, if you use it as a medium, or if you use it as a way that you are directing the things, and then it's okay. It's I mean. It's a lot of people are afraid about that. I'm not afraid at all. I think it's a big opportunity, but it depends from always from you, from your state of mind, what you do with it, and how you're going to use it, and in that case, it can be very interesting. New technologies are always very good. It depends from the person. It depends from the person who create. That's the main thing.
It's a highly subjective thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't use it yet, but I think I'm sure I'm going to try something with it to see. Mainly, for example, what could be interesting. I don't know because I've not used it yet. But do you know to connect many? At the moment, I'm working with.
Mind mapping.
Yes, for example,
Yeah, mind mapping.
it could be interesting to mix. For example, you know, at the moment, I'm working on a project about the composer, the French composer Ravel.
Okay.
Ravel, you know,
Ravel.
from the Bolero, this is quite famous. And um, and I'm writing things. I'm doing pictures. I'm doing movies. I'm doing a lot of things, and it could be interesting to connect that, you know, with all the things all together, and to see how it can be mixed all together with this new technology. Can be something interesting. And after that, to connect, you know, to move that, you know, if you get a proposition to change things, you know, and to see how it's going on. Because there is a part always of when you create that you can have some surprises, you know, and yeah, can be a surprise. This is the good thing. It can be a surprise if you send many things and you receive something but you didn't expect. It can inspire to go on in another way. So in that way, it could be a possibility to interest me to work on
That's so
on that
refreshing.
direction.
That's so refreshing because it's a hot topic. It's very people are very divided about it. People are saying it's people are saying like we've been saying for thousands of years that technology will be our downfall. It'll be our undoing.
Yeah, yeah,
But not all of them. I've met a few very accomplished, smart people who are welcoming AI into their arms, and of course with you already telling me that um, that it's very good for a poet to widen his
yeah,
perspective or their perspective on poetry as much as possible, and that could even include like futuristic,
of
and
course,
search engines and stuff.
of
So
course.
now it's so I've noticed a recurring theme in your work of all your domains is you have a very deep seated love of feminine beauty.
Yeah.
Um, yep. So and I think that's sort of and I find that very admirable because that's certainly lacking here in the States, even though there's so many cases throughout history. Like there's this movie adaptation of John Fante's novel, Ask the Dust, where they say, "What does happiness mean to you?" And she replies, "To fall in love and not be ashamed of it." And then it happened again with Marcel Proust, where he came up with this thing called the Proust questionnaire, and in it, he has the question like, what is your favorite qualities in a man, in a fellow man? And he said it's a man who has not lost touch with his feminine qualities. So, do you feel that the world could use more of that in their art? Do you feel that that's still lacking in any sort of way?
I don't, sorry, my English not so good. I did not understand everything. If you can repeat it,
Okay,
please.
yeah. So I've noticed. So basically, to be succinct, uh, the most common recurring theme I've seen in all your work is you
Yeah,
have a very deep seated love of feminine beauty.
yeah.
Um, do you feel that that is, especially, among male artists, really not being afraid to show their love of feminine beauty and to not be afraid to materialize it into art?
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Do you feel that that's still lacking, or is that something you want to see more of in the future?
Ah, it's a good question too. I think but it depends. I think for me, the feminine beauty is really it's up to close. It's very close to for me also. You know, I did a book called Beauty, la Galerie des Beautés. What's mean the beauty of the gallery of beauty. You know, and that have to do with one portrait of woman. But it was an idea of the galleries, you know, who also expose David Lynch, and we had this idea because everybody say, you're very, you work very well to show the beauty, the feminine beauty, you know. So why we don't make a book where there is all this beauty, you know? And I said, all right, but in that case, we can okay we do that, but we have to choose not anybody, but we can have people from several ages, we can have several kind of faces, physicals, you know, it's more interesting. And my gallery say yes, it's a good idea, we can have that. And I say because I say, if we do that, we are going to make a book for what will be for thousands of portraits. We cannot do that. So the best thing is that we try to make in our surrounding what are different person that we know or that we don't know. For example, some of the people from my galleries, I didn't know them, but to see how we can work for this book, we have to do with feminine beauty. And what I did is that I was thinking, no, I can't do that simply as a picture. Uh, I'm not satisfied about that, you know. So beauty is not, it needs more than that, especially feminine beauty, because I love I really love the psychology of women, you know. I always find it very, very interesting. And what I did is that I put a camera, a video camera. So I put on the video, and we start to discuss with the person, And the person started to talk, to talk, to talk, to talk. And was a moment where the person said a sentence what was very beautiful, who have to do with his life or with her life, with her, I don't know, with her philosophy, what they feel, you know. And we choose together a sentence, what they say. And also a moment on the video, but I could stop. And that after that, I do like a drawing from that. Because for me, beauty is like, it's like a person who appear or disappear. You know, it's this movement for me, the beauty. And was the sentence written just under the person, the sentence what the person say to me, of course. And what I did is that in the other page, I wrote a poetry for about the person and the sentence, what I feel this time after to talk with this person. And was just one sentence. So we have one sentence, the portrait, and one sentence of the person. One sentence was my poetry, one sentence the person who did something very original, special, very pure, and his portrait like a drawing appearing.
Yeah. So
This is
that's
for the definition of the beauty, feminine beauty.
yeah, I loved your use of the word like environment, giving it a whole autobiographical element to it. Like again, you said very subjective in terms of where we find inspiration to do futuristic projects like this. And yeah, that basically concludes everything that I thought was important to ask you. So thank you so much for doing this. And then the last question I have is, how can we support you if more people want to find your work and support your work? How can they do that?
Aha, good question. I don't know. I have a website. I'm not really very busy with to communicate or I'm doing the things. I always did that. I mean, it's also in my character, you know. Well, you can always find things, you know, if they look for in Google, you know, they find my name as you did, you know, very well, because you're very, very well informed about my work. But I like to do it in that way, you know. For example, last time I was very surprised. I did my last event was in the Silencio. Silencio is the place in Paris what David Lynch created a few
Yes,
years
yes.
ago. And they invited me to go there to do an event. So I did it. Well, it was with movies, poetry, well, a lot of things. And incredible was a lot of people coming. And I didn't know how, you know, but I like that. You know, we're talking about music. We started with that, you know, because you're American. I love the Velvet Underground, and it's one of my favorite bands. And the
What's your
Velvet,
favorite? What's your favorite song by them?
oh, there is
My
so many.
favorite, my favorite is "I'll Be Your Mirror." That's my favorite.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That one is it's so beautiful. You're right.
Yeah,
I
that's my
can,
favorite. But
I can imagine. Now that one is really so beautiful. And Velvet Underground was like that. You know, it was
unintentional. Mhm.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
like that.
All right. So great. So yeah, we discussed way more, and this went so well. We discussed like you taught me things that even I didn't know after studying Leonardo for several years. Da Vinci. Like
Ah,
I never even knew about his duties, for the king and stuff like that. Like I never even knew about that, even though I've read his biography and stuff. There's still stuff that like that's still omitted, and that's sort of the bad thing about history is that it does tend to. They say like, what's the phrase? History, history, history omits. Uh, gosh, what's the word? Like history omits the mundane. Like we forget since people typically only study the exciting parts of history, we tend to forget what the everyday life is like for brilliant people like Leonardo and Picasso and stuff like that. And we talked about your relationship with David Lynch, which was awesome. You got to explain digital, electro, and interactive poetry, your three branches, as I call it. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this, Leonardo. Thank you
So
so much.
much to Jon. I'm very happy that you find me. I don't. It's a pleasure to me for me to discuss with you, and I can feel that you're a person very informed, very intelligent, clever, and able to understand and to feel the things. So I'm very happy, and we keep in contact, of course. Who knows? Maybe we will do something together in Paris or in Orlando.
You, yeah,
You can.
you have my contact. You let me know whenever you're ready.
Okay, with a lot of pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much, Leonardo.
So, thank you too. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Bye.